The wind cut through the empty cemetery like a whisper carrying secrets. A single metal tag, dulled by rust and time, swung gently in the breeze, its chain tangled in the brittle grass. A tag that shouldn't have been there, because the man it belonged to didn't exist. The clink of metal against stone echoed louder than it should have, as if demanding to be heard after decades of silence. The smell of wet earth rose in the air, heavy and cold, clinging to the gloves of the man who had just unearthed it. His breath came in short clouds. His fingers trembled. On the tag, there was a name, barely legible, the edges worn by war and years. But here's the thing. That name was nowhere in the archives. No service records, no obituary, no grave. It was as if someone had reached into history itself and erased him. The discovery should have been impossible. And yet, here it was, in the hands of a stranger who had no idea that he had just opened a door to a story buried deeper than the soil beneath his feet. In the photographs that followed, the tag looked ordinary. But if you held it close enough, you could see faint scratches, markings that didn't belong, a date that didn't match any battle, and something else, something almost invisible unless the light hit it just right. The man who found it would later admit he didn't sleep that night. The sound of the chain hitting the metal tag replayed in his mind over and over, as if urging him to look deeper. He couldn't shake the image of a soldier, young, uniform dirtied, eyes haunted, standing in the rain, holding this very piece of metal. But who was he? And why had his name been removed from every official record? Those who eventually got involved in the search would spend months chasing shadows, digging through forgotten attics, tracing letters written in fading ink, and meeting people who claimed to know something, but never spoke the full truth. Every answer led to another question. And then there was the jacket, old, moth-eaten and stained in ways that told a story words never could. It had been locked away for years, stored in the back of a family's storage shed. No one had touched it. No one dared. Until one night, someone finally did. The zipper was stiff, rusted in place. But when it finally gave way, there was something inside. Something that would change everything. Not just for the man whose name had been erased, but for everyone who thought they knew what really happened in the war. And that's when the jacket was unzipped, revealing something no one could have imagined. The zipper's teeth snapped apart with a sound far too loud for the quiet room. Inside the moth-eaten jacket, wrapped in a thin layer of yellowed paper, was something small and heavy. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't money. It was a folded photograph, black and white, edges frayed, creases deep from years of being opened and closed. In it, a young soldier stood between two others, all three in uniform. The rain blurred the background, but the soldier in the middle, the one with the piercing eyes, was wearing the exact same dog tag now sitting on the table. Except, the other two men were easily identifiable in military records. Their service numbers matched. Their stories were known. The man in the middle? Still nothing. As if someone had removed him from the picture. Except they couldn't erase the photo itself. On the back of the image, a single line was scrawled in hurried handwriting. For, when the truth can finally be told. No name, no date. Just those words. The man who found it, a retired history teacher named Robert Haynes, sat in silence, staring at the photo. His mind raced. Who took this picture? Why keep it hidden for decades? And most of all, why did it feel like this soldier had been deliberately forgotten? Robert picked up the phone and called an old friend, a military archivist at a small veterans museum. The conversation was brief, almost whispered. "Bring it, here," the archivist said. "Tonight." When Robert arrived, the archivist examined the tag, then the photo. His eyes narrowed. He traced the scratches on the metal with a gloved finger, then turned to Robert with a look that was part disbelief, part fear. This Shouldn't exist, he murmured. If what I think is true, then someone wanted this man's name gone for a reason, and that reason might still be dangerous to talk about. Robert leaned forward. What are you saying? The archivist looked toward the locked door as if making sure no one was listening. I'm saying, he whispered, that this soldier may have been on a mission no one was supposed to survive. And just when Robert thought he was starting to understand, the archivist added one last sentence, one that would change the course of everything. He might not have died at all. The archivist's words hung in the air like a cold breath in winter. He might not have died at all. Robert felt the weight of the dog tag in his pocket as he drove home that night. The rain pattered against the windshield, each drop a reminder of the soldier's piercing eyes in the photo. If this man had survived, where had he been for the last 80 years? And why hide? The next morning, Robert did something reckless. He returned to the storage shed where the jacket had been found. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe nothing. But behind a stack of cracked crates, wedged in the corner, he found a small metal tin. Dust coated its surface, and when he shook it, something rattled inside. Inside the tin was a letter. The paper was brittle, stained with water, and something darker. It was addressed to Mrs. Eleanor Carter, the soldier's mother, Robert assumed, but the stamp had never been postmarked. The handwriting was rushed, uneven, as if written in a hurry. Ma, if you get this, it means something went wrong. They'll say I'm dead. Don't believe them. Keep the tag safe. One day, the truth will matter. No signature. No date. Just that chilling message. Robert's hands shook as he read it over and over. The soldier wasn't just erased from history. He knew it was going to happen. That night, Robert took the letter back to the archivist. The older man paled when he saw it. This isn't just a soldier who went missing, he said quietly. This is someone who stumbled into something bigger, maybe something the military buried. Robert frowned. But what could be so big it would require erasing a man's existence? The archivist hesitated, then opened a locked cabinet and pulled out a map. Europe, 1944. He pointed to a small French village, circled in red. This place, he said, it disappeared from official reports after June 17, 1944. It's as if it never existed. But I've seen whispers in old files about an operation there that went wrong. Very wrong. Robert's heart pounded. And you think he was there? The archivist looked him in the eye. I think he was the only one who came out alive. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice to a near whisper. And if that's true, someone might still be looking for him. The words, someone might still be looking for him, echoed in Robert's mind long after he left the museum. It sounded paranoid, but the archivist's pale expression told him it wasn't just a theory. 2 nights later, Robert returned to the museum after hours. The archivist had agreed to show him files he wasn't supposed to have, documents salvaged from a government storage facility decades earlier. The place smelled of dust and old paper, the air heavy with the weight of secrets. On the table, the archivist spread out a thin folder marked with a faded stamp. Classified. Inside were fragments of reports, many with large sections blacked out. One page caught Robert's attention. A roster of soldiers assigned to an unnamed operation in France, June 1944. 2 names were clearly legible. The third had been crossed out so violently the paper had torn. But the torn edge revealed part of a middle initial, and it matched the one on the dog tag. Before Robert could ask more, a sound broke the silence, the crunch of footsteps on gravel outside the museum door. Both men froze. The archivist quickly swept the papers back into the folder and shoved it into Robert's hands. Go out the back, now. Robert hesitated. Who is it? The archivist's eyes darted to the shadow moving past the frosted glass. Not someone you want to meet? Robert slipped out the back door into the cold night, clutching the folder to his chest. He kept to the alley until he reached his car. His headlights stayed off until he was miles away. When he finally pulled over under a street lamp, he opened the folder again. Among the files was something he hadn't noticed before. A photograph of the same French village, but it was burned around the edges. In the background, a plume of dark smoke curled into the sky. On the back, in the same hurried handwriting as the letter to Ma, there were 4 words, "Not the enemy's doing." Robert's stomach tightened. If it wasn't the enemy, then who destroyed that village? And as he sat there in the glow of the street lamp, a car he didn't recognize slowed down as it passed him. Then it stopped. The engine idled, low and steady. Through the windshield, Robert could see the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat. The figure didn't move, didn't even pretend to check a map or answer a phone. He was just watching. Robert's pulse quickened. He slid the folder onto the passenger seat, started his engine, and pulled away. The car followed. He took a series of quick turns through dark, empty streets, trying to shake the tail. Finally, in a desperate move, he pulled into the parking lot of an all-night diner and slipped inside. The bell above the door chimed. From a booth in the corner, Robert kept an eye on the parking lot. The car was there, idling under a flickering streetlight. "Coffee?" the waitress asked. "Yeah, and keep it coming," Robert muttered, his gaze never leaving the window. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the car rolled away into the night. Robert exhaled, but the knot in his chest didn't loosen. The next morning, Robert drove straight to the archivist's home, only to find the front door ajar. Inside, the place was ransacked, drawers yanked out, papers scattered, cabinets overturned. The archivist was gone. On the floor near the desk, Robert spotted a single scrap of paper that had been missed by whoever had searched the place. It was part of a telegram torn in half, with only a few words visible. "Evacuation failed. Target extracted. Under orders from..." The rest was missing. But in the corner, there was a date. June 17th, 1944. The same day the French village vanished from official history. Robert's hands shook as he pocketed the scrap. Whoever extracted the target had pulled the soldier out alive. But why hide him? And who had given the order? That night, Robert sat in his dimly lit kitchen, the folder open on the table. Every document, every photograph, every fragment pointed to one conclusion. The soldier had been part of something the government would do anything to bury. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. That's when he noticed something he'd missed before. Faint, almost invisible writing along the edge of the burned village photograph. It was a set of coordinates. The numbers etched on the photograph were faint, barely visible unless tilted toward the light. Robert wrote them down, double-checking each digit before entering them into an old map database. The location? A remote stretch of forest in northern France, miles from any major road, far from where the erased village had once stood. 2 days later, Robert was there. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of pine and earth. The forest floor was thick with moss, muffling his footsteps. He followed the GPS until it led him to a clearing. At first, it looked empty. Then he saw it. The rusted remains of a structure, half buried under soil and vines. Not a house, not a bunker, something else. Its walls were thick steel, twisted by heat. He stepped closer, brushing dirt from a corner of the metal. Stenciled in faded black paint were letters and numbers, a U.S. military designation. Whatever this was, it wasn't supposed to be here. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Shafts of light cut through gaps in the rusted walls, illuminating scraps of torn fabric. An American flag, patch half burned. A metal crate lay overturned, its contents spilled. Ration tins, a broken radio, and another dog tag. Robert picked it up. The name was different, but the scratches were the same style as the first tag. Someone had deliberately marked it. He turned it over and froze. Scratched into the back were the words, "They're lying to you." His chest tightened. 2 soldiers, 2 erased names, and if the first one had survived, Maybe this one had too. As Robert stepped out into the clearing, a twig snapped behind him. He turned. A man stood at the edge of the trees watching him. His clothes were worn, his face hidden beneath a hood. But even from a distance, Robert saw the glint of a chain around his neck. It was a dog tag. The man raised a hand, not in greeting, but in warning, then vanished into the trees without a word. Robert's heart pounded. The erased soldier was alive. Robert stood frozen in the clearing. The image of the hooded man burned into his mind. He didn't chase him. Somehow he knew the soldier had allowed himself to be seen. A message, not an accident. Back in the U.S., Robert pieced together the fragments: the erased roster, the burned photograph, the letter to Ma, the second dog tag. And then, in a moment of quiet clarity, the archivist, who had gone into hiding, called him from an unlisted number. They were sent into that village, the archivist said, his voice low. Not to save it, but to destroy it. Orders from above. Orders that couldn't be questioned. Robert gripped the phone. Why erase him? Because he didn't follow the order. He tried to get people out. And he succeeded. But that meant admitting the mission had been wrong. So they buried him. Buried all of it. The archivist gave him a final piece, a sealed envelope mailed decades earlier but never delivered. Inside was the soldier's handwritten account, page after page in careful script. It told of how he disobeyed, how he hid survivors in the forest for weeks, how he was smuggled across borders under false names, and at the end a single line: "If history cannot honor the truth, then let the truth live outside of history." Robert scanned the pages into digital archives, attaching every document, every photograph. Within days, the story spread. Historians debated, veterans groups demanded answers, and for the first time in 80 years, the soldier's name appeared in public record again. Families of the survivors came forward, holding faded photographs of the man who had saved their parents, their grandparents. Some wept. Others simply stood in silence, as if finally placing a missing piece into the puzzle of their family's history. One quiet morning, Robert returned to the cemetery where the first dog tag had been found. This time there was a headstone, clean, white, with the soldier's full name etched deep. Flowers lay at its base, placed by strangers who now knew his story. The wind whispered again through the grass. But now, it carried something different. Not the weight of a secret, but the echo of a name finally spoken. Because the truth had not died with the war, it had simply waited until someone cared enough to find it. If this story moved you, there are others on our channel that deserve to be remembered. Click the next video and help us bring these forgotten heroes back to light. And don't forget to subscribe.